For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
You're on StratNews Global. I'm Nitin Gokhale. Continuing with our special coverage on Afghanistan and the turmoil that country finds itself in, we have a guest who has covered Afghanistan for over 2 decades and someone who was lucky to get on a last commercial flight out of Kabul on 15th of August last Sunday. Joining me today is Lynne O'Donnell, author and journalist who has extensively reported from Afghanistan on the ground and was, by her own admission, lucky to escape in time along with a photographer colleague. And right now she's joining us from Holland, but otherwise she lives in London. Welcome to this program, Lynne.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, it's something that we look forward to, given your extensive experience in Afghanistan. So first up, how do you see nearly a week later the situation in Kabul and rest of the country panning out over these last 6 days?
Well, what we're seeing on our news broadcasts is terrible scenes of chaos and panic. We're also seeing the Taliban rolling out their public relations strategy. And beyond that, I think we can say that we're really seeing Afghanistan now through the prism only of Kabul. We don't really have any idea of what's happening outside of the capital. And that's because it's basically been closed down. Media organizations have been closed or taken over. Journalists are no longer working on the ground outside of Kabul. And those who are in Kabul, many of whom have come to the capital to escape Taliban reprisals, if you like, and abuses, are not able to work. They're in hiding. So I can say that over the past 6 days has been what I think is a very well orchestrated chaos. Tens of thousands of people at the airport believing that they're going to be able to get out. We saw those awful scenes on the tarmac at the airport earlier in the week, which I think were also orchestrated. We've seen the Taliban declare Afghanistan as its Islamic emirate, which is a real back to the future moment, if you like. And we've seen the American president try to distance himself from the chaotic panic scenes that we've seen. And we've seen other governments, notably that of Britain, just flailing, and nobody really seems to know how to think or what to do about the terrible situation that has ensued.
Indeed, you've summed it up very well. In fact, I was reading your latest dispatch, and its headline, I watched an entire nation betrayed by fools to fanatics. And I think you've called the Americans as well as the British, as you just mentioned. In fact, I was appalled at the sound bite that has been playing out across the world of the military chief of Britain's army or the forces, who says that they are just village boys and probably more reasonable. I mean, what has sort of brought this change in the outlook of the Western democracies or even their military chiefs? What do you think has gone wrong?
I think what they want to do is, I think they want to paint this as a situation that doesn't need intervention. They don't have the appetite for going back in militarily, except to pick up their own people. And some of the stories that I've been hearing are really shameful. You said I'm here in Holland at the moment, and the Dutch embassy staff cleared out in the night without even telling their local colleagues that they were going. It's just been a really cowardly exercise. Now, when we hear from people like General Sadiq Carter, as you mentioned, the head of the British Armed Forces, say, well, the Taliban are reasonable, I think it's because they want to try and distance themselves from the terrible mistakes that they've made. I can't blame America for wanting to go. 20 years, trillions of dollars, thousands of lives, not just American lives, but tens of thousands of Afghan lives, and incredible graft and corruption in the people that they entrusted with the country. Ashraf Ghani and the small cabal around him have been terribly, terribly corrupt. And the money that should have been going to build hospitals and put surfaces on roads and make sure kiddies have enough to eat and shoes on their feet to go to schools was being stolen. And it's in overseas bank accounts in the names of people who were in the government. So, of course, America wanted to say, okay, enough's enough. We've given you everything. If you can't do it yourself by now, we have to leave. But the way in which they've left has been really quite inadequate. And now we hear the British, for instance, saying we really shouldn't have left. Well, you know, nobody put a gun to Britain's head or to the heads of the NATO members and said, you have to leave. They made that choice to leave with America. And there are technical issues. The Americans were running the air support, and that meant also casualty evacuation. But come on, you know, every military in the Western world has an air force. Surely they can learn how to fly helicopters in to get wounded soldiers. So I just think, Nis, that it's been really inadequate, and now there's a real wasn't our fault effort, and it's just not good enough.
Indeed, in fact, it's a human tragedy that is unfolding in the front of our eyes. Perhaps sort of a repeat of what happened in 1996 or even later. You've been watching and reporting Afghanistan for such a long time. What should even the intellectuals or even well-educated people in Afghanistan look forward to now? Because it's like back to the future in that sense. And the Taliban doesn't seem to have changed even an iota. What's your prognosis, if I may ask, if at all, if you want to hazard a guess?
Well, I think at this stage we are hazarding, let's say, educated guesses. I think that this is a different scenario from 1996, when the Taliban did go in and ended a terrible and terribly long civil war by bringing in their own brand of peace, a violent peace with rough justice, and claiming that it was all according to some sort of extremist interpretation of Sharia law. At this juncture, we have senior political figures who have been bankrolled and supported by the international community for 20 years. Former President Hamid Karzai, Abdullah Abdullah, who was a foreign minister and also a deputy to former President Ghani, who, as we know, left the country rather ignominiously on Sunday, and Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, who is a former warlord and pretty much a Taliban himself, really, very close to both Iran and Pakistan. And what they've done is form what they're calling a coordination shura, or council. And they intend to use this platform to negotiate with the Taliban leaders to create what they say is going to be a fully inclusive government. And I think what this really means is that they're going to be the acceptable face, if you like, of whatever administration is formed in Kabul in the coming days, weeks and months. Now, they didn't like Ashraf Ghani. He was an incredibly unpleasant, angry man. He played favourites. He played tribal favourites and personal favourites. He was a micromanager, totally non-charismatic and incapable of delegating to people who he needed around him. For instance, his generals or his interior ministers or his defense ministers. He changed them. If there was any pushback, he changed them. And so this meant that there was no consistency in leadership at any of the important ministries. And he was always concentrating on what he thought were big legacy projects rather than actually running the country and keeping his people safe and his country out of the hands of murderous, lying, drug-dealing insurgents, which is what the Taliban are. Now, we also see in Kabul at the moment that the only 4 embassies that are open and functioning as normal, as some of those diplomats have told me, are China, Russia, Pakistan, and Iran. And I think this is an indication of what's coming. The Chinese gave the Taliban leadership very ostentatious red carpet treatment in Beijing on the 8th of August. And this really was an indication, I think, that they had the Taliban's approval to come into Afghanistan to do infrastructure projects and to exploit the mining and mineral assets that the country has. The Chinese have always wanted to build railroads across Afghanistan to get the stuff that they make in their factories and the factory belt of the eastern and southern seaboards to their markets in Europe faster than they do at the moment, which is by sea. And the ambassador of China has told me that himself. And so I think that the Taliban have said, we won't say anything about you genocidally murdering Muslim Uyghurs as long as you come in and give us buckets of money as well as diplomatic recognition so that we can look as if we're actually building a country. So they've got China on board for sure. I think the Russians just want peace, and they'd really like it if Afghan heroin would stop coming into Central Asia and Russia. The Iranians would like that too, but I think that they want some influence over not only trade into Afghanistan, but I think that they want a tame and stable Afghanistan on their border. And the Pakistanis, well, you know, they've bankrolled and supported and looked after and helped strategize the Taliban for 20 years because they see Afghanistan as a foil against Indian influence in the region. I can see you're running the footage of the red carpet in Beijing, which just sent shivers through me. I lived in China as a journalist for more than 10 years. I know very well what their mentality is, and I know also what they want out of Afghanistan, and it's nothing good, but the Taliban are going to get what they want, and that is power, recognition, and money.
Oh, indeed. In fact, it seems to be the revenge of the Taliban over the Western world, and they have managed to get these 4 countries on their side. The happiest, of course, is Pakistan, which means that India, at least in the short term, has a big problem on hand, at least on the strategic front, even if not in Kashmir so much, because in India, the understanding is that the Taliban is not so much interested in Kashmir really, while the Pakistanis would want them to take interest in Kashmir and create trouble there. But moving on, do you think the Taliban is united enough to present a coherent front or even a semblance of governance in Afghanistan? Or there are factions within, and some of them are totally in the control of Pakistan, and some may be looking sort of behind the scenes to have some kind of relationship with the Western world, particularly with the United States?
I'm not really so sure about that. I don't feel confident enough to make any analysis of what levels of factionalization there are at the top of the Taliban, which does seem to be presenting a united front, or even at middle or battlefield level. It seems to me that the figures who have been involved in the peace talks, the so-called peace talks, have made a great effort to make it very clear to their commanders on the battlefields that they weren't getting into bed with the great infidel United States. And look what's happened. They've been able to say to all of the people who support them and follow them, we beat the Americans, we beat the big superpower, the great devil. Now, I've always looked at, I know there's always been questions about how united they are and can the people at the top really control the people at the bottom, and et cetera, et cetera. But in the last couple of years, we've seen ceasefires. When the leadership has said, we're going to have a 3-day ceasefire for Eid, you know, in this awful way they've been teasing not just Afghan people, who are the biggest victims of this whole debacle, but also the world. We're going to have a ceasefire. It's going to last for 3 days. look what we can do. And they do it. They have ceasefires that hold for the time that they say that they will hold. And that is an indication to me that they can turn on and turn off the spigot of violence. Now, in any political party, there are going to be factions and opinions and, you know, a little bit of argy-bargy and debating. And I think that we can't put any of that down to a disunited Taliban. What we're seeing in Kabul at the moment is very much a victory lap by what looks like a united enough entity. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a well articulated point, I think, and I take it. But there are also you know, smattering of protests and kind of marches, I would say, going on in Kabul at least, where women are now standing up, and some people have also put up the Afghan national flag over the past couple of days. Is there a possibility of any kind of a resistance building up, given that Amrullah Saleh and Ahmad Shah Massoud's son both are speaking about building some kind of a resistance, more so Amrullah Saleh? But do you see, you know, the question that I have, is there a civil war imperative that we are staring at, or it's far-fetched at the moment?
Oh, I think we're seeing a civil war. I think that there is civil war when you have powerful and charismatic people like Amrullah Saleh, the former first vice president, and Ahmad Massoud, the son of a revered, legendary commander, anti-Taliban commander. You know, September 9 is Massoud Day across Afghanistan. You can't go anywhere. I bet you can go a lot of places this week, but up until Sunday, Ahmad Shah Massoud's photo is everywhere. He's a hero, and people choose to put that up. So I do see that what we have at the moment is a civil war in the making. Saleh and Massoud are in the Panjshir Valley, which is only an hour's drive outside of Kabul. It is closed. The Taliban do not have a presence there, and they are very much plotting their armed resistance against Taliban rule. So yes, we are seeing, when you said united before, I thought you meant the Taliban, not the country. The country is not united, and we are seeing these sporadic and brave attempts at demonstrations and protests and flag waving. It's Afghan Independence Day, which is today, which explains that, and by women who are incredibly brave because they risk being beaten. We have to remember as well, I think you're probably going to get to this, I might be jumping the gun a little, but the Taliban make billions and billions of dollars every year from their drugs business. And this is what has bankrolled their insurgency, along with Pakistan, of course, as well as control of the minerals and much of the mining assets in the country, which is what the Chinese want. And so we are looking at a criminal enterprise, the biggest in the world, that peddles misery. They're liars, they're murderers, they're misogynists, and things are only going to get worse because at the moment I think they feel they have to be on their best behaviour, and they have Karzai and Abdullah and Hekmatyar, I think, trying to keep a little bit of a lid on their worst tendencies while they roll out whatever is coming next administratively.
This trio, you think, of Abdullah, Hekmatyar, and Karzai would give them a veneer of respectability, is what they are hoping, perhaps, in the world, given that these three have had extensive contacts with the Western world as well as with others, including India and, of course, Pakistan. So we are looking at civil war as we have sort of put a question mark there. But coming from you with such extensive experience, it does look like civil war there. It's tragic for the people of Afghanistan. I thought they had built a new society, aspirational, educated, and trying to live like normal human beings elsewhere on this globe. but it seems to have all been shattered over the past 6 or 7 days. We can only hope for the best for the Afghan people. But at the moment, you would think, and I don't know whether you will agree, but the outlook seems to be very bleak going forward. Lynn?
Well, it does. And if I just go back to the civil war scenario we were talking about just now, you've also got the Uzbek leader, Abdul Rashid Dostum, and the former governor of Balkh province, which is essentially controlling of the north, Mohammed Atta-Nur, and they're holed up as well. I think they may be over the border in Uzbekistan, but they are definitely not going to bow easily to the Taliban. So we may have a full-scale civil war, not just Saleh and Massoud coming out of the Panjshir as Ahmad Shah Massoud did in the 90s. What was the question that you just asked? I'm sorry.
No, I just said that the outlook seems very bleak, and we won't be wrong in concluding that at the moment for the people of Afghanistan, it seems going to be a very bleak future. You would agree with that?
Yes. Well, of course, yes. I mean, this is already one of the poorest countries in the world, along with North Korea and Somalia. After 20 years of, development and aid money and capacity building, and it's also one of the most corrupt, along with, again, Somalia and North Korea. So for Afghanistan to pull itself up under the auspices of the biggest criminal outfit in the world is going to be very, very difficult. I think we have a humanitarian crisis unfolding in front of us. It already was, because it hasn't been just a 6-day route. It's been a 3 or 4 month military route across the country. And that has left a terrible toll, not only of destruction, but a traumatized people. From in every corner of the country. It's a terrible situation. And I think you're right, pulling out of this and getting over it is going to be generational. But also we've got to remember that the bulk, something like 75% of Afghanistan's population is aged under 30, and the mean age of the country is 18. It's an astoundingly young country. And as you say, aspirational. Everyone's got a smartphone, everyone's got a Facebook account, Instagram, Twitter, you name it. Now, in the past few days, a lot of people have scraped their social media identities because they're afraid of repercussions from the Taliban, and I think rightly so. But I would be very, very surprised if you and I are sitting here in 3 to 5 years and Afghanistan is the basket case that it was in, let's say, 1992 or 1993. I think there will be a very great resistance, whether it's social or political or military, as Saleh and Massoud would like to clearly do. I think there's going to be a lot of resistance that may well be very difficult for them to resist in coming years. And we've got an emergency meeting of the G7 coming up next week, specifically to discuss Afghanistan. And I'm just really hoping that some sort of reality takes grip, and that the people who lead the Western world, or the richest part of the world, just remember that, as you say, they're people and they're living normal lives and being part of the world. And now they don't feel like they're a part of the world anymore, that they've been abandoned. And I just hope that the G7 leaders can show some compassion and humanity and sense when they meet to discuss Afghanistan next week.
True, let's hope so. There's some compliment to you from one of our viewers there. Brave of you to covering Afghanistan. There is also a question from someone who says, what is the impact on India's diplomatic assets in Afghanistan? We didn't discuss India enough, but I wanted your take on other issues there, because we have been discussing India's role or India's lack of role in Afghanistan all of this week. But I still can't resist asking you this question, which has been posed by one of our viewers here. If you can answer that.
Well, to be utterly honest with you, I haven't really taken very much notice of what India has been doing, to my shame, for the last few months. I mean, I do know that there was a reach-out effort to the Taliban, which took a lot of people by surprise, and I guess that was an effort to know who we may or may not be dealing with. Educated and Afghans and intellectuals have come to resent India's role because they see it as like poking a wasp's nest with a stick. If India wasn't here, then maybe Pakistan wouldn't be here either. I'm not sure that I agree with that. I think Pakistan's strategic interests, and now China's, they're a proxy of China, of course, would see it always wanting to play a role in Afghanistan. But I did detect that. I thought that was noteworthy. Let's see where India falls in the future. I have detected a willingness to be friendly and supportive, but not much beyond that. It's all very well to build roads, but Afghanistan's going to need a little bit more than road building in the future. So let's see what happens.
Oh, indeed, indeed. But that's a very interesting insight, I would say, on what's happening there. The dynamics keep changing. It's a very fluid situation. But Lynne O'Donnell, thank you very much for your time and your insights. And it is incredibly brave of you to have been there when the country was collapsing. But you're back at least to safety, if not home yet. We will have further occasions in the future to talk to you and get your insights. Do keep safe, and of course from COVID too. And do keep watching StratNews Global. We are a new digital platform, but with a lot of, I would say, a deliberate discussion that we do on these matters. So don't judge us with the standards of Indian media channels if you were to do that. But thanks very much again.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been my honor, and I wish you the best of luck with developing your platform too. Thank you, and anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynne. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. So viewers, do keep watching StratNews Global. We will keep bringing quality discussions for you, and of course, insights from experts, and not just people who seem to have theoretical knowledge. Do keep subscribing to the YouTube channel that we have. You know our social media handles, and of course, keep giving us feedback so that we can improve and bring you more diverse topics and subjects to not just discuss, but to also give you insights. Thank you very much for your time. Until the next time, it's goodbye.